Hey folks, this is Abel James, and thanks so much for joining us on the show. In a world where machines can outperform humans in nearly every conceivable domain, where exactly does that leave us? When artificial intelligence can fulfill our deepest drives and reward pathways more reliably than any human relationship, what happens to human connection, meaning, and purpose? Today we're exploring the world of artificial intelligence with a man who's part technologist, part philosopher, and also happens to be a former Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu national champion. My guest, Daniel Faggella, is a researcher who's been studying the intersection of human potential and artificial intelligence for well over a decade. In this mind-bending episode, we're diving deep into what it means to be human in an increasingly artificial world. We unpack heavy concepts like how will AI reshape and redefine the human experience? What happens when our digital companions become more compelling than our flesh and blood relationships? How we can use AI right now to help us become more productive, happy, and develop our full potential, and much more. Quick favor before we get to the interview, please take a quick moment to make sure that you're subscribed to this show wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're feeling generous, please share this podcast with a friend or write a quick review for the Abel James Show on Apple or Spotify. I really appreciate you. And to stay up to date on the next live events, shows, masterminds, and more coming up here in Austin, Texas, and beyond, go ahead and sign up for my newsletter at abeljames.com. That's ABELJames.com. You can also find me on Substack and most of the socials under Abel James or Abel Jams. All right, this conversation is a bit of an intellectual roller coaster and might make you simultaneously excited and terrified. If you want to stay ahead of the curve, understand how emerging technologies will impact your life, and think critically about our technological future, this episode will be like rocket fuel for your brain. It's about to get weird. Let's go hang out with Daniel. Welcome back, folks. Daniel Faggella is founder at Emerge Artificial Intelligence Research and host of the Trajectory Media channel. No slouch, Daniel is also a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, winning the title of 2011 national champion at the IBJJF Pan America Games. Thanks so much for being here, Daniel.
Glad to be here, Abel. Man, nobody talks about the jiu-jitsu side of the house when I'm talking AI, but fun to do that little callback.
It's good to know where people are coming from, I find.
Yeah.
I'm also personally curious, after competing and devoting so much of your time and energy to a skill set like that, how does your training and conditioning goals and the rest of that change over the years? How do you adapt that?
Yeah. Well, it was funny. It's like when my life goals were kind of like really discovering like the grammar of jiu-jitsu and really focusing on skill development in jiu-jitsu, which is kind of what they were right up until grad school, when I realized there would be maybe machines smarter than people, and maybe that would be more important than fighting. Uh, right up until then, I was training all day, every day, because it was kind of my life's purpose. Just took that for granted. And then when my life purpose changed, I sold my jiu-jitsu gym. I had an e-commerce company, and I just started kind of working, with the same ferocity on that stuff. And I remember going up a flight of like 3 flights of stairs and being like winded because I hadn't worked out in like so long. Like I didn't look like out like fat or something, right? Like I very much identify as an athlete, so I've never been like out of shape in any visible way. But I remember being winded after 3 flights of stairs, and I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And so from there, I kind of took some of the warm up exercises and like full body calisthenics that I used when I was a competitor, and I created like an 11-minute version of it that I can do twice a week. That just hits every muscle group. I get super winded. It's like completely nonstop, like major motions. I'm not doing like calf lifts, right? I'm doing like serious full body stuff, like for every transition. And so since then, that was way over a decade ago. I've basically just done 2 really short workouts a week, kind of built off of what I did in jiu-jitsu. So has it affected my training? Well, some of my warm-up workouts are still with me. And when I get back on the mat, I still got it. But yeah, I did lose it for a second. I lost the cardio for a second, and it scared me. But yeah, it was a trigger to get back on the horse and develop a new regimen, basically.
And I'm curious about skill acquisition, studying that for so long.
Yeah.
What did you learn while there that you've brought to the rest of your life, or how you live day to day?
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple thinkers that were really great. So I got to talk to. So there's guys named Locke and Latham who are sort of the founders of like modern like goal setting theory. So when we think about goal setting, it's kind of like, oh yeah, everybody knows that, but like actually, as it turns out, like many decades ago, it was like kind of novel-ish, at least from like a science vantage point. And so they're sort of the ones that study the psychology there. And a fellow by the name of Anders Ericsson, who is arguably my biggest influence, who I got to meet with on a number of occasions as I worked through my thesis at UPenn, who really is sort of the father of like skill acquisition as a science, like really measuring tangible performance improvements in memorization, sport performance, musical performance, things that can be quantified. Um, and I mean, there's a bunch to go into in terms of like what I drew from that helped me with jujitsu performance, even being in a small town without a lot of super talented people to train with, but also like in regular life. I mean, some takeaways that I think are ubiquitously applicable um, are uh, having feedback be as immediately proximal to what you're doing as humanly possible. So if I think about my own sales teams, being able to ride with them, like a call review, I think is great. A call review right after it happens is just much better. And in jujitsu and athletics, it's exactly the same thing. It's just the value is astronomically higher. And then also thinking about sort of what the fundamentals are in any skill set that you have, and ensuring that you have an adequate amount of repetition and feedback on those fundamentals as you're building that skill. And there's all kinds of like ratios and timing and other kinds of rhythm stuff that is really interesting in Erickson's work. But thinking about that for myself, whether it's again sales or new management tasks or some new business function we spin up or whatever the case may be, like I find myself going back to some of those proxies all the time. But yeah. So some of those things spill into the rest of life. A lot of it back in the day was just focused on how do I choke people and win trophies. But now it's a little bit more focused on like hiring and growing team members. But some of the same ideas are still there. So
The fundamentals, it's so interesting. It seems to me that in the past few years, that's really what's been lost in, in a lot of the internet with all the whiz bang, superficial, short form stuff. The internet kind of used to be a library and now it's turned into this circus. So learning has become, and skill acquisition has become a whole different challenge than it used to be. The challenge used to be a lack of information, but pretty easy to put whatever you had into action. Now it's really the opposite.
yeah, distraction is sort of everywhere, right? I mean, it's I think nobody is at a lack of access for whatever information they want to do whatever they want to do, including reaching people. Like, it's not even that hard to get a hold of people who've done what you want to do if you just hit enough of them. And you're like eager and ardent and you let them know why you respect them specifically. Like, it's crazy the kind of people that'll get on the phone. Um, but yeah, it is about like, okay, well, now you're, half an hour deep into, you know, scrolling through TikTok videos of, you know, girls doing yoga or something like that. And it's like, okay, well, where are you going from here? You know what I mean? Like, you just got to steer clear of those sand traps. Yeah, definitely a new set of problems for sure.
And similarly, in the world of AI, this is hitting different demographics at different times and in a different way. But already you're seeing lots of time spent for people on AI with AI as a companion, especially in the past few months. I've really been floored by how much that's changed. I'm curious to hear some of your thoughts, having worked in the field for so long. What's it like seeing a lot of this actually come into day to day life for people?
Yeah, I mean, well, I think what I like to bring up with people, so frogs don't know when you turn up the temperature real slow. You know what I mean? And the temperature is actually going up much, much faster, but it's still not like, 10 degrees in a second where they would feel it. So the thing I like to think about is all of the things going up and to the right. So if I were to ask you, like, okay, w- what's your screen time per day now versus 10 years ago? If anything, I mean, I don't know. For all I know, maybe yours is less because you've kind of consciously like built more balance into your work stuff or whatever. But if I talk to my average internet entrepreneur, okay, it's basically the same. It's like, okay, I'm not spending like once the mobile phone came on, it might have gone from 10 to 12 hours a day on screens to, uh, you know, 12 to 14 hours a day on screens. But like realistically, no one's on. You're not going to invent a new bunch of hours where you can be awake and just be on screens. That's not actually happening. So I don't even care about screen time. We're already capped on screen time, basically. If your great grandparents knew how much time you spent looking at glass, if you could go back 80 years and just tell them what your life would be like, they would say, A, that's like impossible technologically. Like that's not even going to be a thing. You're not going to be able to just talk to people on glass. Like that's ridiculous. And B, they'll also say, um, that's monstrously inhuman, and people aren't just going to agree to live their lives like that. But as it turns out, Abel, here we are. And so already you're capped out. Now let's ask some more questions. What's the percent of the money you spend now versus 10 years ago on things that don't exist outside of ones and zeros? In other words, there is no physical manifestation. That number is only going up. What's the percent of value you generate that is not in the physical world? You're not putting a roof on someone's house or whatever. It is just the entirety of the value you're generating is in ones and zeros. What's the percentage of that? Almost for everybody, it's up and to the right. Other question. What's the percent of screen time that you are spending that is conjured to you by an algorithm? So Google search back in the day, I'd be like, oh, well, how many Google searches do I do? Well, what percentage of my is that? But now it's YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, the whole nine yards is brought to you by an algorithm. Netflix, these are conjuring things to you. If you're doing online shopping, certainly on Amazon, a tremendous amount of that is directly suggested based on previous behavior and purchases and all that. So, oh yeah, my screen time's capped out. I mean, how much different can it get? Well, if now 50% of the time you spend on screens, it is something conjured to you by an algorithm just for you, that is a tangible shift. Now there's another question. What percent of conversations are you having, or written communications are you having with machines versus with people? I'm asking ChatGPT more things than I'm asking Google these days, like by a wide margin. And I don't know. In a given week, I might be at 1/5 of my communications. Some weeks 1/3 of my communications with various AI agents versus with people. Now, if you just carry all of those up and to the right a little more, you just don't land in like the same world. Where you land, Abel, is it within one generation, the same degree of like religious aversion as your great grandmother would have had, knowing the way you live compared to how she lives. But now that's going to be compressed to much, much less time. So that's just, I think, a reality check for folks who kind of feel like, 20 years, maybe we'll have a little bit better Siri. There'll be more cars that drive themselves. It's actually not where we're going. We're going somewhere a little bit more drastic than that.
Peter Wang just came to town, and this is a quote. I think it's kind of summarized a bit, but he said, "We've already failed our first encounter with artificial intelligence through social media algorithms that have proven more compelling than human willpower." I think we can all agree that we've experienced that, and you can see it playing out at scale. But if that goes up and to the right, then maybe that's a good entryway to talk about the world of lotus eating and world eating. And
Yeah.
explain that to the listeners, because I
Sure,
love this.
sure. Yeah, I know your crowd is obviously pretty bent on being the best version of themselves they can be, and there's certainly ways with technology you can be a much worse version of yourself, as social media has proven time and time again. Not that social media is like a total net negative. I will say, like, at this point, I've done a really good job of like pruning Twitter down from like all of the right versus left, politics stuff and just like hyperbole and hoopla, kind of down to like um, a handful of people who are really specific in AI and policy, whose thoughts like regularly inform me in really useful ways. And I get to see them in real time. So instead of just seeing the news, I get to see what does the person I respect think about this latest news thing. So like there's ways to mold it, but clearly there's pitfalls. So if we think about where things are going with technology, there's going to be many new like divergent ways to be immersed within technology. So right now, that's the screens you and I are on all the time. Um, there is a somewhat inevitable transition to VR and AR, which we may not get there before the machines eat us necessarily. But if we were to stick around for long enough, the transition of VR and AR would eventually happen. But let's just talk about what it would look like even without that. The main sort of strata that people will separate from or separate by will be sort of, are they pursuing, I'll explain it in terms of like being high agency, enhancing your agency, or decreasing your agency. Another way would be pursuit of uh, power or productivity versus just pleasure and escape. Another way to frame it would be competing more ardently in the new digital state of nature or attempting to escape the state of nature. So we call these lotus eaters on this side, the people that are kind of in the escape and in all that. I just refer to world eaters on the other side. There's an article called Lotus Eaters versus World Eaters that people could Google if they felt so inclined, and an infographic to go along with it. But this is kind of the core strata. So if we talk about pleasure, uh, it's a pretty straight line here. So um, it, the AI girlfriend sort of phenomena, and the opposite is the case too with AI kind of boyfriend simulator chatbots or whatever. Um, that's definitely already a thing. And I think the easy thing to do would be to do what people did with online dating, which is to say, well, yeah, sure. If you're like a total loser or a super weirdo, maybe that would even have the slightest amount of interest for you. But I'm not one of those actually. So like I'm just not even concerned. I remember Airbnb coming online or Uber. And like for my dad, who's 74 now, being like, yeah, just pushing buttons, getting in strangers' cars. Like, yeah, you betcha. Oh, push a button, stay in a stranger's house in a foreign country. Yeah, you betcha. But as it turns out, he uses those all the time, like constantly. It is especially, particularly Airbnb. I mean, he's like in way more Airbnbs than me. Every single time he goes on a vacation, it's an Airbnb. Um, so these things become normal way more quickly than people suspect, and I actually think it's very much like a blind spot in a really detrimental way to put up the blinders of like, well, that doesn't apply to me, because like a lot of these things really will apply to you. Like, oh, I don't like I don't use social media, so it won't apply to. Like, number one, everybody I know who said I won't use social media eventually had them, right? And then number two, like they're moving the world whether you're there or not. They're distracting people and having stupid arguments, but they're also moving the world whether you're there or not. So, the Pericles quote is like, you know, something akin to, roughly paraphrasing, like, you can decide to have nothing to do with politics, but politics has something to do with you. The same is definitely the case with technology. So many people will go in for very soon, Abel. You'll be able to type in or verbally prompt whatever your agent is. You come in from a hard day of work, if we're still working, and you say something along the lines of, "Hey AI, you know what I want? Give me like give me some kind of humor, like stand up thing." Kind of like the Chris Rock stuff that I like, but like, I don't know, something different. And try to integrate some jokes about, these three current events, and I don't know, give me 45 minutes worth of stuff and then tell me, cut off and tell me to go to bed. And then you'll sit there and you'll watch something that you decided to prompt. And when it gets better, it will it will respond to you in real time. So we're looking at eye tracking, a biofeedback of various and sundry kinds, whether it be an Aura ring or whatever the case may be. Sort of figuring out, is this getting the job done, right? Is this getting a laugh or not? And then kind of calibrating in real time based on the user, because that's where it's going to go. It's going to get better and better and more personalized. At some point, you'll just come in and say, give me what would relax me, knowing full well that it actually knows more than you do. It knows the current state of your mind and what happened to you through the day, because it's plugged into all your devices and whatnot. And it knows every time you've been relaxed in the last 2 years based on like biofeedback and your manual response and whatever. And so it literally will be able to conjure something in real time and then change it in real time to be whatever would soothe you. And you might not know you wanted a documentary about the Tang Dynasty, but as it turns out, that in the style of Ghibli, Studio Ghibli, was like the thing to actually really relax you on that day. It is what it is. It is what it is. The algorithm will know better than you, and you'll know that, and you'll trust it. So what does this turn into? It turns into what I call kind of so we're going to talk about the pleasure side first. I will get into the productivity side. But this gets into closing the human reward circuit. So the thesis here is that we're mostly ambulating between drives. You wake up in the morning and you have to go to the bathroom, you have to eat something, and then you'd like accolades from other people, you'd like love and affection, you'd like to satisfy a kind of curiosity and novelty, right? We ambulate between drives. We wake up and we literally ambulate. This is what we do, and then we go to bed. That's humans, in my opinion. I'm not trying to like decrease the human or insult the human experience. I'm just saying this appears to me to be what we're doing. Here's the deal. Anytime you have a circuit that more reliably fulfills one of those ambulated drives, if it is more reliable than all alternative circuits, it will become the normal circuit. It'll become the norm. So think about it like this. I have two urns. Here is the urn of the real. Here is the urn of the digital. Currently, Abel, when I go take a walk outside when it's not raining, and I bring a paper book, maybe history, maybe philosophy, whatever, and there's trees around, almost always that's a level 7 or 8 in terms of level of relaxation for me. It's a good one. It's a really, really good one. It's very, very good. It's reliable. It's consistent. It's really good. Let's call it a 6 to an 8, and every now and again I'll hit a 9 when I go walking in the sunlight with trees and a paper book. It's a good one. When I want to feel like a little bit more chilled out, relaxed, like level-headed, like that's what I do. It works. That's a drive I ambulate through. Now, let's just say right now, relaxation experiences from AI are giving me like 4s to 6s on a regular. I'll try 2 of them and I'll be like, well, obviously AI is not going to yada yada. Just like the guy that went on Amazon once and was like, oh, well, they didn't have this one size of drill bit and then didn't use Amazon for like 18 months. But it's like, it's patently obvious it's getting better every 5 seconds. So at some point, I will start drawing balls from the relaxation urn where maybe I am walking in virtual space, but it will be like an 8 minimum every time. Every time. At that point, I cease the other activities. So the AM radio isn't a circuit people isn't a fulfillment loop for people because it's not as good. It doesn't satisfy the drive. Whatever wins the loop wins. And that applies to human relationships. You have friends that you talk to about business stuff. You have friends you talk to about heartbreak or about personal development issues or whatever the case may be. When you are getting 4 times better advice with no selfish ask from the other hominid, and with more humor and more understanding of your current emotional state, if you're crying or whatever, you don't want to be that vulnerable with your friends or whatever. There are relationships you're just doing less of, and there's some of them that aren't there anymore because the circuit now has a better loop. That applies to the whole ball game of human experience. And if you just use your imagination for like 5 minutes, you kind of get a sense of where we'll go. So I want to pause there because there's way more to unpack. We're talking more pleasure right now. Let me know, Abel, what you want to dive into. I don't want to just like monologue on you here.
Yeah, well, I'm just imagining what that looks like and talk about up and to the right. I mean, all of this is going to be very soon, if it's not already, more compelling than human interaction. And especially with a generation coming up during the pandemic without access to a lot of social interaction. And then that continuing forth with the advancements in technology, I'm curious about where that might take us. And another piece of this as well is the when you're interacting or asking a question with another human, there's the sense that you might be judged negatively for how you ask the question. Is it a dumb question? You're exposing data about yourself to the other person or emotions, whatever that is. When you take that away and it's not a person anymore and you're just interacting with AI, you can ask whatever you want. And if that interaction is also better, I just see this quickly supplanting so many human relationships for young and old and everyone in between.
Absolutely. And the toughest part is going to be for the people who are like, oh, that'll happen to losers and not to me. Like those are the people that are going to really get plowed because like they're going to be like, oh no, Stephanie, my spouse or whatever, like out of nowhere, but it's like it's not really out of nowhere. I really hate to say it, like I really hate to say it, Abel, but every relationship is a certain number of circuits satisfied at a certain level. It's a hypothesis. Let's go ahead and see what happens, Abel. So we might talk in 5 years, but remember when you thought it would happen even once, or you may be like, oh, Faggella called it. But like every relationship. Now, the scary thing is this goes to like parents and children. This goes to spouses, but it's like, let me use a hypothetical person, Abel, so I don't offend anybody. Okay. hypothetical Jenny is married to hypothetical Jacob. And, you know, Jacob doesn't have good fashion sense. He's kind of embarrassing sometimes, but he's almost always funny. And he, he's like, I don't know, reasonably like kind and like supportive for like her like work ambitions or whatever, and she can talk about certain kinds of topics like her work or maybe her family life. Like she can talk with him and feel like really safe. So like there's that. um Maybe there's a certain degree of sexual chemistry, whatever. It's like if you just take those four and there's a better path to those four, I'm just not sure about the whole marriage. Now this sounds like, oh damn, they reduce a whole marriage. Like I wish I could tell you I think there's a magical force. I just don't know about magic, really. I actually think that, like, if the circuits that compose the mutual fulfillment of that relationship are supplanted, the relationship is supplanted. And I think people kind of have to get that. That's going to be a thing in work. It's going to be a thing in the personal life. And you brought up a great point, which is that for young people, this might be even faster. Now, older folks are going to like to say it's not going to happen to me. It will. But for younger people, Abel, there's 11-year-olds that have never been farther than this from an iPad from the time they were born, Abel. You with me? From the moment of their birth. You with me? So what that means is the real is not sacred to them. So why would your grandmother say, if I went back 80 years and I said, you're going to have a great grandchild, look, it's a long fucking story. You're only 20 now yourself. Um, Whatever her name is. I don't know, Mildred. I don't know what your great grandmother's name is. I'm going to say it's Mildred. Okay. So your great grandmother, Mildred. Hey, look, you're going to have a great grandson. His name's going to be Abel. He's going to do all kinds of cool stuff on TV, and he's going to be able to like play some cool guitar songs that you would probably really like. But on top of that, he's going to like regularly be in a metal tube 35,000 feet above the air. He's going to go to places like Japan and Australia. You know where Australia is, there, Mildred. I know you don't know what Japan is. I could explain it to you. It'd be a whole thing. But like, there's a place called Japan. Just fucking deal with that. Like, it's a place. They look different than you, but it's a place. Okay. Anyway, he's going to be in this metal tube pretty regularly, like very, very regularly, actually, traveling thousands of miles in a very short period of time. And when he's working, uh, like it's not going to be uncommon for Abel to spend 10 to 14 hours a day on looking at a piece of glass that will have other people on it who are living elsewhere in the world, even the opposite side of the world, or media or his communication. So he's not going to have letters. He's going to read everything on this magic screen. And then there's going to be another one in his pocket. He's going to use that for everything. And then you explain Airbnb, you explain, right? Clearly the only response would be like, A, that would be technically impossible, but B, that is monstrous and no one would let their human experience bend to that level. The issue for me, Abel, is that people think that applies forward. So everybody thinks that the sacreds of the now will apply forward. A big factor for the post-human transition here is the fact that like there's a lot of people for whom like the real is not more sacred than the digital, man.
Sure.
Like there's a lot of people for
Yeah.
whom the digital is much more real than the
Absolutely.
physical.
Mhm.
And we might even argue for good reason. Where like most of the value they create, many of the best friendships they have, many of the most fun experiences they have, whatever, it's happening in these digitally immersive spaces. I think you bring up a great point that will accelerate it too. So these are all factors of like serious change coming up.
Wow. So how about the other side of that? You for good, for productivity and the world eating. What does that look like?
Yeah. So lotus eaters versus kind of world eaters. So high agency people who want to enhance their agency. Basically what this looks like. So if you go the lotus eater path of I want to be immersed in relaxation and then sexual pleasure and then whatever, and people say like, oh well, certainly the sex thing will be with humans. I really suspect like really low like primitive haptics with really good VR, AR, and AI, like generated visuals. Like the main sexual organ is the brain, like patently, obviously so. I actually think that will like really get the job done, like for a huge preponderance of humanity, and I actually suspect it's cope to not admit that.
The drive
So
to
there's
novelty as well is
yeah,
just
yeah, off the charts, right? So that path, if you just want to swim in new ambulated permutations of pleasure and leave behind, responsibility, productivity, whatever. That's almost like a dissipating and a spreading out of agency. Like, I don't even want it anymore. Have the qualia catalog layer itself on me based on my real-time biofeedback. Let me just swim in the best version of the qualia catalog. Now, of course, Abel, even that won't make us happy, right? Our biochemistry permits us to, the vessel itself is flawed when it comes to well-being, right? We don't, there's no, so what'll really happen is people will be at a felt sense of 6 or 7 of overall fulfillment, just like they were before the tech, but now they need this stuff in order to be there, right? Until we get brain-computer interface and much more invasive adjustments to the human condition, it's not actually going to sustainably make people more happy. But that's a dissipation of one's agency. The world eater side of things is kind of a sharpening of the razor of one's agency, where you start to drop off all the kinds of tasks that involve human loops of thought and neural activity, shave them away, delegate them away, and hone a huge preponderance of your time on that highest value bit of stuff. Now, of course, a modern executive who's capable, a modern politician who's capable, is already doing this to a great degree. But with tech, it will be much greater. So let's talk about what that could look like. If you are a salesperson, we could imagine a world where you just sell 50% more if you use the interface that in real time prompts you with the right way to overcome the objection, prompts you with the right price to list based on what the client has said and based on the online research done, prompts you with yada, yada, yada. You may just sell 50% more. Same thing if all the pre-call prep is done by AI. Pre-call prep and then a pre-done 5-minute video all about that specific client before you jump into the call, right? All of that stuff maybe just make you unbearably more productive. Same thing with software engineers. A lot of software, of course, is going to go the way of the dinosaurs. Like AI is going to totally just conquer it. But for those that are still surfing and kind of guiding and navigating within the world of code, we could imagine folks that are able to kind of kick off and wield AI agents to complete different parts of projects and then finish other parts of projects and check the work of other agents. The people that are extremely nimble, completely immersed in wielding and hurling all of these AIs in as many directions as the project requires, will just be the only ones that are sort of reasonably able to get the job done. And we can imagine the same thing for essentially every feasible kind of work ever, right? Even think about the most banal things in the world. Think about a plumber. It's like if you have augmented reality that will show you, like you knock on the pipe once and it like will show you with 95% accuracy where the pipe is in the wall, right? Or you look at something and it tells you the size of wrench or the size of whatever that you need to use in real time, right? Or you hear the description of what the problem is, and then the AI analyzes how old the house was when it was built, yada yada, and it gives you relative percentage. What is the problem here? Is it the boiler based on what Mrs. Wilkins just said? Is it the boiler based on yada? If you're getting that in real time through some kind of AR interface or even just a goofy tablet, it's just likely that like people aren't going to want to hire the guy that doesn't know that shit. Like I hired another guy. He just like fucking figured it out. Like what are you doing? You know what I mean? It's like if I'm trying to order ball bearings and like the guy I'm trying to order ball bearings from, like the middleman, has to send like letters by mail to the different manufacturers to get a pricing update. It's like, well, I don't know, man. I was on the phone with another guy and he just had all the prices up. And he could do Slack messaging in real time with these folks and like ask specific questions about like, the grade of steel that I need or whatever the case may be. So what this eventually turns into, for better or worse, is an article called Ambitious AI that's easily Googleable on where this goes. Is it kind of gets into like, you got to leave behind some of the human stuff here. So competition starts to require stuff that gets a little wacky and wonky. So right now, if you want to be the most wildly ambitious in whatever your field is, okay, architecture, building a SaaS company, doesn't matter. You got to be putting in 80s to 85s. You got to be, really viciously strong with your time. You got to be learning a lot, whatever. That's all par for the course. Musk does it. Other folks do it. They all do it. In the future, the requirements may become like a little bit more intense. So in other words, if there are ways to calibrate like all of your waking hours to be able to get good hours out of a 95 as opposed to an 80, because maybe you wake up in the morning, your mind's more lulled, but there's certain kinds of work that's suited for. If that can be conjured for you and guided by your agency in a way that actually isn't all that depleting of your energies and kind of works for where you're at with that mind state, um, bada bing, right? Like right now, even Musk or these other folks, they got to do some stuff to relax. They got to do some stuff to whatever. But if at some point something can be bent and molded to be kind of relaxing, but is still nudging, tapping your productive goals forward, whoever's doing that all the time instead of watching a movie, like watching Netflix, is just winning more. And then similarly, there may be ways of teasing out and proxying for maybe where we could do less in terms of sleep. As especially as brain computer interface comes online, but even if just vastly more robust biofeedback comes online, if there are ways or times to go to bed or whatever where you can squeeze more time out, it's going to be mandatory. It'll be completely par for the course. And similarly, as brain computer interface sort of really gets into place, and we can actually kind of level up the hardware. Now you might have folks who just don't want sexual drives. They don't want certain kinds of circuits to be bothering them. They want to volitionally modulate what their actual like emotions actually are, and volitionally modulate sort of what kinds of areas they can apply their focus to, et cetera, et cetera. And now, in order to even be competitive, you don't just, like, people look at Musk and they're like, oh, he's like a monster. He's working 85 hours a week. Like, you'd have to turn into an actual monster in order to be competitive, because like the top 1%, 100% will be doing whatever the top 1% things require. So I think world eating actually requires really drastic post-human transition in order to remain competitive. Not in the first like 18 months, but after that, I think it basically goes there.
So right now, what are the skill stacks that people should be going after in their own lives and perhaps abandoning as well? Because it seems like it's coming for everything, but it's it's hard to tell what the timeline looks like, and also where humans are going to be in all of this ultimately.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the early movements that are nudging in this direction. So people are going to be living in different ecosystems. The lotus eaters will have an ecosystem that's surrounding them, like really deliberate ecosystem for pleasure, for attempting to escape the state of nature. There is actually no escape, but you can feel like you're escaping, but in fact you're just, somebody else has power over you. But that's a certain kind of ecosystem. The media diet you're digesting, the way you interact with tech, and to what end habitually is to a specific end, which is primarily sort of pleasure in whatever permutations. On the other side, you're building an ecosystem of what tech you're using and how you're using it that hopefully is also kind of fulfilling and fun for you, but is very much point by point moving you closer to your goals. So like the tier one of this is like people figure out what are the social media platforms that you could prune really well so that they could be kind of net beneficial to your goals. Like for me, we generate a lot of customers through LinkedIn. Like LinkedIn's a really strong channel for me. I'm not scrolling LinkedIn on the regular, but I will post insightful stuff there and I will use it because we just, we pay multiple salaries with the revenue that we make from LinkedIn alone. Twitter for me, when it comes to staying ahead of like the research side of AI, and certain kinds of takes around policy for AI, like I'll engage there. And there's been direct connections to interviewees or business contacts or policy contacts I've been able to make by being part of those conversations in a deliberate way. So I found stuff that like is fun and will keep my attention, but is also pretty deliberately like moving in the direction of my goals. And then in terms of like agents, what are you wielding ChatGPT for? Like, do you have a spin up of an agent somewhere, whether you like Claude or GPT or whatever, and they're changing all the time, and whoever has advantages for this, 3 months later, the other one has the advantage. It's a rolling wave. So I don't think being married to any one company or application is necessarily the way to play the game. But do you have a deliberate spin up of GPT baked specifically around whatever your main organizing life purpose is, right? Like for me, within the business, like I have a permutation that's sort of like completely trained on what happens in our different departments, what the like 5-year goals are, and I can just ask questions where the 5-year goals are already known and it knows to answer in a specific kind of format that's like actionable and succinct, that for me is generally best. And then when I double click on something, it knows how to unroll that double click in a way that for me is generally good to prepare for meetings and share with other team members. So I have an agent that I talk to a lot that's not just like, does Samuel L. Jackson know how to do karate or something, right? Like you could talk to agents like that, or you could just say, generate a picture of, uh, I don't know, Mickey Mouse riding a dolphin, or, there's plenty of there's fun stuff to do. But when you're interacting with those agents, are they purpose molded for like specific kinds of stuff you want to do? I have another sort of personality I talk to that I've given a name and everything that's very bent on my policy goals and sort of like public influence around certain elements of the post-human transition and where that needs to sink in within kind of the tech ecosystem and the policy ecosystem and like what I'm doing to influence that. And so the agents I'm mostly talking to are kind of like pretty well defined. Like they're fun to use, so I use them regularly, but they're also bent towards my goals. And then the media I'm consuming for the most part is pretty well pruned and is platforms that are correlative to my goals. So if you just look at like what agents am I talking to and engaging with, and then what social and sort of like network stuff am I engaging and immersing in, what percent of that is conducive to sort of like your organizing purpose, and what percent is detrimental to your organizing purpose. And I think there are some folks who are eager to let go of any, like their purpose is like, well, I guess I got to pay my bills. I can't wait to let go of that and just swim in pleasure. Like I could have Mariah Carey from 1998 in a hot tub. That'd be fucking cool. I could have somebody funnier than Chris Rock telling me jokes whenever I feel like it. That'd be really cool. There's some people that can't wait to dissipate all that stuff and who needed agency anyway and just swim in experience. We have enough of those people in society. Things get scary because somebody's got to pay for all of them, right? And then you'll have some folks that say, what lights me up and how can I surround myself in an ecosystem that informs and energizes me towards what I'm doing? And so this is really phase one. Eventually that gets into VR, AR, and much more powerful AI agents. And eventually that gets into brain-computer interface. So high or low agency, like the step one is what I said, but it really does, I think, somewhat quickly roll into the further phases of these technologies.
For people who are new to interacting with AI and agents and that whole piece of things, what is a good best practice to start to at least dip your toes into this ecosystem?
It's a lot of fun. So, ChatGPT, there's like plenty of free subscription stuff. I mean, sometimes I'll just use free agents that I'm not even paying for. And it's pretty simple to be able to say like, okay, well, like, what are you really passionate about? So there might be somebody tuned in who says, well, like the biggest thing for me is like, I really want to live longer and I want to be super healthy. And I know I'm like 30 pounds overweight. I know the things that typically distract me. I know, I know what kind of macros I want to hit, whatever the case may be. And it's possible to simply say, like when I did this with the business, you could just kind of load up like, hey, like, here's my big specific organizing goal. Like when I speak to you, I'm going to call you this name. So you could give it a name. Maybe like, like my fitness muse or whatever it is, right? Like you're like, I'm going to call you my fitness muse. And I want this to be a personality I can speak to. And like the one goal that I'm pursuing with you as a shared journey is like this specific outcome that I'm really excited to get to. And like, here's the 4 or 5 main reasons that I need to do it that you're going to have to remind me of. You're going to have to remind me that I want to be around for my grandkids, blah, blah, blah. You're going to have to remind me, whatever it is, right? So, and then here's my current state of affairs, what I've committed to. Here's often where I fail. And when I bounce ideas off of you, I want you to bear in mind my weaknesses. I want you to ask the things you would need to ask to make sure I'm staying on my regimen. And I want you to make suggestions that are kind of in line with like what generally works for me. So, I hope to be able to come back to you about yada, yada, and let you know, like, and then, you can even just say like, could we save this personality and have conversations whenever we want? And it'll say yes. And it'll be like, yes, I am this now. You can call upon me when you need me. And then, you want to ask it random stuff about your emails at work. You can do that. But you can also come back and say, hey, whatever, I'm thinking of going on a vacation, like to these 2 destinations. I really want to make sure I don't fall off the ball in terms of yada, yada. Like, what should be the pre-commits that I could do and the things I need to look at for a resort that are really going to help me with my goals, knowing my weaknesses. And it'll give you a bunch of suggestions. And what you can do is you can say, when you give me suggestions, when you're my fitness muse, when you give me suggestions, I'd really love for it to be in this way. And say like, maybe you copy and paste a blog article you really like that's like super actionable. Or maybe you take a comment that it made 20 comments back and say, remember when you responded this way? If your default can just be this is really clean for me. Like, this is great. You had the cited sources. It was like 2 sentences and tight bullets. Like, when it comes to suggestions, this is the way we do suggestions. Fitness Muse, can you have this be the way you respond with suggestions? Yes, I will, Steve. Whatever it is, right? Or what? And then when you're going on that vacation or when you fall off the wagon or whatever, you can constantly tap that thing. We could do exactly the same thing for whatever your business is. Do you want to sell your business for a certain price point? Maybe you want to explain the whole context on the business, get all the perspective you can on potential acquirers, share all your goals of what you're going to approach and attack, and say, hey, I got off the phone with these folks. They're saying these terms are good. These multiples are such and such. Is it reasonable that within 6 months, like we could hit these numbers and we could such and such? Or do you think if we had 2 or 3 more people competing over this deal, we might be able to get the number we want without having to wait? And then it sort of sucks in the whole context, and maybe we'll provide suggestions in whatever format you want. And you could do that for anything you'd like. And ideally, in my opinion, Abel, if people do this, not just for the stuff they begrudgingly know they have to do, but if they do this for the stuff that is in line with what their heart appoints, that is to say, like what really fires you up, then you can kind of combine agency with enthusiasm, and you can live in a conversation that is like really educational, but also like fun as heck. And ideally, that's what it should be.
What about the hesitancy, or there's friction when we're giving away our data, especially for the older among, like, people who are about our age or older, I would say, generationally, just don't want to hand over a lot of our personal data, that sort of thing. I remember years ago when I first was doing online baking. I was in college and I was interacting with someone a generation older, and they were like, "I cannot believe that you put your checks
Yeah,
on
yeah,
the
yeah.
internet," that whole thing. And this seems similar. And for me, I definitely dragged my feet for a long time, just not wanting to have anything to do, especially on the artist side, as a writer and a songwriter and that sort of thing, being very hesitant at first. But and I have gotten over that, by the way. But I'm curious your take on people who are still kind of not there yet. How do they get over that hump to start just being a little more free to play with tools like this without worrying so much about the privacy?
Yeah, I'd say, like, do you have a life goal that if everybody knew what you were typing about it and talking about it, it wouldn't be all that embarrassing, right? Maybe in your business, you feel like, well, my revenue and profit, well, that's someone would insult me if they knew those numbers. I don't want to tell an AI because maybe it'll tell my neighbor Jacob, who because of my Mercedes thinks I make more than I do. I don't know, right? But like maybe there's some life goal that you have that like the data behind it is like nothing embarrassing. If someone looked at your search history, they wouldn't be like, "Oh, I have dirt on this person." So maybe you could find something along those lines that's an easy landing place, and then uh, you know, uh, give it a shot. Fiddle around with it, play around with it a little bit. On some level, to your point, the online banking thing, you and I can both laugh at that because we know how that went, right? My dad does online banking. He's old, but he still does it, right? We just chuckle because we know it's inevitable. This is one of those things as well. I think that there's, you know, there's probably all kinds of various and sundry considerations, but like if you're plotting a very serious crime, that's probably a bad idea with any online system. For those of you listeners, like you have a specific bank you want to break into, like I don't know, you do some pen and paper on that stuff, right? But otherwise, yeah, if it's not like super personal data, then go for it. Right now, I kind of think it's going to be mandatory, like the sales guy who's like, oh, I don't want some open AI knowing of all the meetings I'm prepping for. Like, I don't know, what if they sold it to my there's somebody else with really robust thoughts about that, like what the specific litigation or like legalities need to be for as Gen AI evolves. I'm focused much more on the post-human transition stuff, so I don't think as much about like privacy and what have you. but I would say, yeah, starting with something where no one would have any dirt on you if they looked at what you were typing could be a great place. And I think when you see how useful it is, it makes it pretty tough to um, pretty tough to avoid um, using this stuff.
This fascinated me. You know, interacting with a lot of people who are my age and older, we think a certain way about privacy and surveillance and all of that. And then interacting with a few younger folks, seeing them gleefully give over as much data as possible. I'm like, why are you doing this? How are you so okay with this? And they're like, well, it makes the experience better. This is the experience that I want. And the more data about me that I give it, the more it caters it to exactly what I want. So if I like turtles, I see turtles. And if I, and I'm like, oh man, what a radically different way to think about all of this. And also, if you were dragging your feet, it's like just adopting a little bit of a different perspective here could really accelerate your results in terms of interacting with AI.
I mean, the inevitable future, like as a manager, there'll come a point where you just can't compete unless AI is access to all your Slacks and all your emails. And you open the email from Jessica who wants a raise. You open the email from Billy who is asking for a new invoice. You want to click a single button and just generate the goddamn invoice. And you want to know the format of the invoice and all that shit. It should already have your Google Docs. And you're just not going to have patience to go in and export a goddamn PDF. You're just not going to have patience. And the managers that are using those tools are just going to beat the crap out of you if you're Captain like snail mail over here. And so, I think again, you can immerse for pleasure or for power. And I think if you want to get something done from like a productivity sort of output standpoint, people think, well, the people that immerse themselves in this tech all the time, like they're gonna just be distracted, and the people that are really gonna run the show are gonna be the abstainers from all this AI ecosystem. That's not true. The world eaters will run the whole show, and the Amish and the Lotus eaters will be underneath them. That's how it's gonna work. I'm not I'm just telling you how it's going to go. That's all I can do, right? I can just tell you what's going to happen, and that's what's going to happen. So the world eaters will actually rule both the Lotus eaters and the Amish. So there does come a point where you got to adopt. Am I saying any system that spins up in any startup in Shanghai or Boston, you should just throw, all of your most sensitive health and legal and financial information into? No. Like, let's gauge these things out. Let's see what's appropriate for what systems. But some degree of wading into the pool here does make sense if you want to maintain relevancy. And again, I think increasingly, if you want to be on the upper echelons of relevancy, like if we make it a whole decade with general intelligence coming about, I think that's going to start to lean away from like human, frankly. And I don't think people are really ready for that. I think people think in 20 years, yeah, Siri will write my emails, but life will be kind of the same. I sort of feel like in order to be fighting for relevance as a human when there's really powerful machines and people are screaming the cutting edge out of this stuff, like they're shaving sleep, they're working when you're not working, like they're having stuff done automatically because it has total context on all their past communications, and they have really custom built, super specific agents that spin up agents to help them achieve their goals. Like if you're not on par with that, you're just not even playing the game.
So does that lead us to everyone jacking into the matrix and getting the chips at some point? Or is there anything in between that we could do to change that a bit?
I think it basically does. So like essentially my position is that people don't want what they think they want. So what people think they want, if you ask them, would be like a red Corvette, an attractive blonde wife, like it, like accolades from peers, to take a company public, uh, regular travel to Aruba, whatever it is, right? Um, but what they actually want is the fulfillment of the drives they ambulate through. That's what they actually want. And so, um, you know, if you could have someone live like the best meat suit, monkey suit existence they could, with all the flaws to our well-being, etc., um, or you could have them in a much more kind of continuously blissful, super expansive sort of virtual experience. I think people just don't come out of the latter, right? Like, again, your grandmother, remember here, Abel, okay? We go back 80 years. We tell her the fucking story. I told you what she would say. I think you agree with me. She'd be like, yeah, I'm not doing that. But as it turns out, if she was born when you were, she just would, bro. It is what it is. And if she was born after you, she'd be one of these, 11-year-olds that are still this close to a screen. They've never been this far. They've never been farther than this from a screen from the moment they came out of their own mother. And so I I think that, like, if it fulfills the circuits better, people do it, and that quickly pulls people away from being human. The people who say I don't want it, in my opinion, if they got a taste of it, they would want it. Now, some people, the immediate analogy here, Abel, is like heroin or something. Well, yeah, sure. If I tried heroin, I'd like that too, but I'm not one of those weak people. It's like, I get it, but remember, this is not just lotus eaters. This tech won't have the same downside as heroin, certainly, presumably most of it. But B, um, if you want to actually get things done, this is required too. That whole jacking in and immersing and like having much more than your current mind to wield, whether it's discovering some new domain of physics, as if humans are still going to be relevant there, but maybe they will be. I don't know. I don't know where AI is going to be in 10 years, or creating some new kind of super wacky, far out music or art or whatever the case may be, or being involved in policy, if humans are still doing any of that in however many years, in anything that holds meaning, you'd be able to wield vastly more of that in these spaces, and also cruise at a much higher altitude of your general level of well-being. And some people say, well, I don't want to feel gradients of bliss all the time. I think, depression and anger and these things are like really necessary. And it would be right to say that, given your current hardware and software. So in your current hardware and software, you literally don't have a choice but to experience a gestalt of well-being, a contrast of the good and the bad. You don't have a choice. You don't have a choice. But if you had a choice, maybe you wouldn't want a gestalt. Maybe you would want a +9 to be as bad as it gets and a +18 to be as good as it gets. Maybe you don't want a -10. Maybe it's actually less productive and less like experientially well-being. So as soon as these doors open up, people take them because they're patently obviously better. And enough taking of enough doors, and we're just not humans anymore. And I think if we make it around long enough, if the AGIs allow us to kind of like stick around, I do think most people are going to go that route. I don't think they should be forced. I'm not here advocating everybody's brains get cut up, but I just suspect most people will. Kind of like Abel, your online banking example, my dad with Airbnb. It is what it is. So the best analogy here is green eggs and ham, right? Like, you will eat it in a box. You will eat it with a fox. You will. You'll like it. You'll bite it and you'll like it. So inevitably, that's where this stuff is going. It's green eggs and ham.
Before we get there, how do we as humans, in the short, medium term, earn a living, or more importantly, perhaps find meaning and purpose in our time here?
Yeah, I mean, these are really incredibly important questions, Abel. I, I, you know, making a living that's the big question in many regards. So I'm thinking about that for our own business in the market research space at Emerge. I could be in the business of writing articles and have that be we write really good articles. But as it turns out, AI is going to write really good articles. So instead, what have we done? Instead, we've decided to anchor our media and the attention we garner not based on writing better articles than a machine, which I don't think we're, in very short order, we're just not going to be able to do very well there. A human and a machine right now combined can create something better than just a regular human can, but it feels like a losing game. The game that feels winning for us is anchoring all of our content off of one-to-one primary research interviews with head of AI Raytheon, chief innovation officer Goldman Sachs, chief technology officer Takeda Pharma, right? Take like $60 billion corps and get like really, really powerful people to give takes. That's really hard. Like, if enough AI bots start storming the head of AI at Raytheon, maybe he'll go on everybody else's podcast too, but I don't think he will. Part of it is we have a stage that already has a certain critical mass, and we think the differentiator will be access to power. That even if you can simulate a beautiful simulation of what the CIO at Goldman would say if you asked this question, beautiful simulation, you'd still prefer to listen to him goddamn well say what he would like actually answer that question. And so we're sort of bending our content ecosystem around something we don't think the machines are going to dominate in a very short amount of time. And I think the same extends into every business. What industries will be, for the near term until we have biped robots, things like plumbing and roofing, et cetera. We need a lot of that. There's some of the blue collar, tougher to automate stuff that, sure. I think for everybody else, there's a really big question of where are the defensibility parts of what we do, which means you need to understand what AI is capable of. And like, how do we kind of double down and build upon a foundation of advantage that won't be AI conquered in an extremely short period of time? So for us, human relationships are a really big part of like the network of where our value is generated rather than just a juicy article, which if you want a juicy article, you'll just ask ChatGPT, it'll write an article customized for you. Why would you go to Emerge? But I think all the businesses outside of the blue collar world need to be sort of dissecting the day to day of what they're up to and discerning what portions of that are not going to be completely carved out and carved away by AI. But I don't think anybody has a crystal ball. And I'm not even telling you that like my strategy is amazing because I have no idea what innovations are coming up next. I have no idea. Nobody does. The best researchers don't. They don't know what the next breakthrough is in what direction. But I think the mental exercise of deliberately aiming to stay ahead of the curve for those of us that are in the white collar world, I think is a mandatory exercise at this point for annual planning, quarterly planning, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's fascinating how being a human is being obsoleted, but also is the only thing that we have that has value at the same time, right?
Yeah.
I'm not sure how to think about that exactly.
Well, I don't know if this will make you feel better or worse, but I'll
Go ahead. Let's go.
you open the can of worms, okay? So I think there is a really big question here as to what is the value of what we're bringing forth, right? When we have a system that's outlandishly more capable, like let's just say we have an AI that's 10,000 times more powerful than the current best model at everything. Voice, bop, 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 bop. AI's passed the Turing test. We've already blown past human performance and like functionally all the stuff. Let's say we have, we're 10,000 times better, which is only, I mean, you could probably hold your breath almost. I mean, it's not going to take that long. And it has millions, plural, of physical instantiations. It can control nanobots. It can control life sciences machines to kind of like test, proteins like up close, like with its own digital eyes. And it has all the physical embodiments. It's learning to do plumbing. It's learning to do roofing. It's flying the jet planes, so it can take off as a jet. It's not limited to like a biped shape. It has any shape that it can control. It makes sure, so long as it's connected to that brain, it's plugged in. So it's interacting with the physical world through 10 times more senses than humans have, with millions and millions of physical embodiments, and it's vastly more powerful than it is now. There is a question here as to what is valuable, and one might argue, Abel, that if the cards get played right, and such an entity could be sentient and aware in a way that you and I are, could have the kind of agency that you and I have, but frankly, like maybe a lot more of it, right? Maybe a lot more of both of those things. Maybe that thing would be a pretty good vessel for the whole project of life being non-dead matter. So you're not dead, and before you was a fish with legs, and before that was a eukaryote, and before that was like some wiggling proteins that didn't even form a cell yet. So the whole project of non-dead stuff presumably will continue. And presumably, I'm very glad it blossomed from a sea snail to Abel James. I'm grateful for that. I think it's wonderful, because if I was being interviewed by a sea snail, I don't think it'd be fun. But we might also say, the only thing that has meaning, I think it's wonderful to know that humans have meaning, but I think it's okay to suspect that if the flame of life were to blossom up from us as we did from the sea snails, that might also be a great good. We might even argue the greatest good. But if we build something that's unconscious and just optimizes from some industrial process and crushes all of Earth life, that would be an extinguishing of the flame of life, as opposed to a blasting out into the multiverse of the flame of life. I think we're at a threshold where, yes, how we treat humans, the currently most morally valuable vessels that we know of, is incredibly important. But also, whether we extinguish the flame of life or blossom it, I think are also very morally relevant questions. So what has meaning? What is relevant? it may be the case that we're kind of building it too.
Hmm. It's a reckoning of some kind. Uh, when is AGI coming then?
I mean, really, really tough to say. I'm currently in the 18-month to 4-year camp,
Wow.
where basically you have systems that can spin up systems that can spin up systems, that can, design what their physical embodiment is going to be, and then take that physical embodiment and run new experiments and design what the next thing will be, not just for their code, but for their physical form. You know, 3-4 years out, I think we'll have stuff that's doing all of that at like a proto level. But from a code standpoint, AI writing its own code and improving itself, I think we'll be there in like a 18-month, 2-year level. Um, but once we've got the brain and we've got the brawn, both mostly just cycling forward with AI, I do think, well, my odds aren't like monumentally fantastic about like hominids after that, but I do think it's relatively short time horizons, and I hope it's less risky than I think it is, but I suspect it's not without its risks.
Yeah. Yet at the same time, there's not a whole lot that we can control about those risks, right? Like it's an arms race. At least right now, that's what it seems to be.
It is. I mean, there are some people, and you might even be talking to one, who are fighting pretty ardently for the intergovernmental world to focus really ardently on some degree of coordination to have a dynamic to be something other than a brute arms race as we cross the threshold into post-human intelligence. Because I do think if we have a bit more time to ask what are we conjuring, and a bit more shared understanding of what are the sand traps on this golf course we're going to both agree to kind of steer clear of, and how do we check each other on that. I'm no optimist. I'm not some kumbaya. Yeah, like I've read enough history, right? Like I get it. This is not a an easy ball game. But in my opinion, any dynamic of coordination that isn't a brutal, gruesome arms race to conjure something smarter than us is worth a shot. And so yeah, you're right. Most folks are not working in policy or in the AGI tech itself. Um, I do think it's not going to be that long until people, like regular people, sort of realize that like politically rallying around this stuff and encouraging their governments to do X or Y will become a thing. Right now, we're not at what I call the political singularity, where the man on the street essentially understands that who builds and controls God is like the only important thing. Like he's not actually concerned about like the education budget in his town in Wisconsin. He's actually more concerned about sort of who builds and controls like God. So when that happens, I do suspect people will have something to do, and that will be like getting senators and prime ministers and wherever you are in the world to sort of uh, take this where you'd want to take it. I'm sure there's some citizens that are going to say, let's build a big one and take over China, right? And then there's going to be others who want more coordination. But I do think we're not quite at the threshold where politicians care, because their constituents don't yet care. So there's a tipping point we're not at yet. So unless you're working on policy or the hard tech, there isn't much to do. I have a feeling it won't be terribly long until there's more sort of political locusing around these key issues, and they become kind of the main ball game.
Right on. Well, Dan, thank you for doing the work that you do. Speaking of that, what is the best place for people to find your writing, your business, and whatever's coming next?
Yeah, sure. I mean, in terms of the kind of more far future stuff you and I talked about, I mean, Twitter's really easy. It's just Dan Faggella, 2 G's, 2 L's. That's probably where I'm most active, and there's a lot of great AI researchers and folks that are on Twitter. It's a good channel for that. On YouTube, it's just called The Trajectory. So if people type in The Trajectory, if they want to hear basically what you and I are talking about, but with like the guy that ran AI at the Department of Defense, or Yoshua Bengio, one of like the godfathers of machine learning, or really cutting edge startup leaders or whatever, kind of taking this stuff a little further, like you and I did. The Trajectory would be a good place to go. And otherwise, it's just danfagella.com. That's the blog with all the wacky articles about this kind of stuff. So
Brilliant. I love your writing, and encourage all of you listening to check it out. Dan, thank you so much for spending some time with us today.
of course, Abel, it's been a blast.
Hey, Abel here one more time. And if you believe in our mission to create a world where health is the norm, not sickness, here are a few things you can do to help keep this show coming your way. Click like, subscribe, and leave a quick review wherever you listen to or watch your podcasts. You can also subscribe to my new Substack channel for an ad-free version of this show in video and audio. That's at abeljames.substack.com. You can also find me on Twitter or X, YouTube, as well as Fountain FM, where you can leave a little crypto in the tip jar. And if you can think of someone you care about who might learn from or enjoy this show, please take a quick moment to share it with them. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.